Borderlands 3 has a lot of skill trees, with 3 per character included in the base game and another 1 for each character available through DLC. However, while there are a lot of skill trees, not all of them are good. In fact, some are just downright stupid. Hey everyone, I'm Constant Canadian, and this is Borderlands 3's skill trees ranked. If you enjoy this video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Before we get into the video, I just want to say these rankings are merely my opinions. Nothing I say here should be taken as objective, and they are simply based on my own personal experiences. Now, into the video. Starting off with Amara's skill trees, and more specifically Amara's green tree, Brawl. Brawl is supposed to be Amara's melee tree, and I say supposed to because it really only has 2 bonuses to any melee stats of any kind. And while that may seem like a decent amount, granting up to an extra 300% melee damage with the right setup, it has more gun damage bonus skills than it does melee damage skills, with personal space, Samsara, and jab cross. The majority of the skills in this tree are max health, health regen, and damage resistance, which, if you know anything about Borderlands 3's endgame scaling, you'd know that all of these skills are essentially worthless, and they still won't stop you from getting 2-shot in tough mobbing situations. The best skills in the Brawl tree are personal space, find your center, blitz, and mindfulness. And that last one is really funny because while mindfulness grants some very helpful movement speed, it also reduces your shield recharge delay, which is the last thing you want for a melee build where you're running a roid shield. Overall, Amara's Brawl tree is okay for general purpose builds, but as an actual melee tree, it really falls flat. With all this considered, I'd say Brawl is probably somewhere around C tier. Amara's blue tree, Mystical Assault, is Amara's main tree. It is pretty difficult to find a single build anywhere without at least one skill spec'd into. This skill tree introduces rush stacks for Amara, and its capstone allows Amara's action skill to be used twice per cooldown. Mystical Assault is a very good, covers all bases skill tree, with the most notable skill being Remnant, which is one of this game's most broken skills in terms of damage. The combination of Wrath, Laid Bare, and Transcend give Amara a lot of extra damage upon using her action skill, which when spec'd into Avatar and Restless is a lot of the time. Overall, Mystical Assault is a very good general purpose skill tree for Amara, and very honorably earns itself an A tier spot. Fist of the Elements, Amara's orange tree or red tree depending on how you see it, does exactly what it sounds like. Gives Amara an absolute buttload of elemental damage bonuses. Infusing Amara's weapons with her action skill element, imbuing her fist with elemental damage, outright increasing her elemental damage by up to 30%, and giving her elemental damage lifesteal. Amara's Fist of the Elements skill tree is insanely powerful, and it's pretty much impossible to spend skill points in this tree incorrectly, as every skill is going to help you dominate the battlefield in some way or another. This tree is also the tree that has the Ties That Bind action skill, which is without a doubt Amara's most powerful action skill by far, which leaves me no choice but to give it an S tier ranking. Amara's purple tree or enlightened force tree is what I'm going to call Amara's true melee skill tree, as it is much better suited for the job than Brawl is. This tree doesn't grant quite as much in terms of raw damage as Brawl does, but it does pretty much everything else better, and it is clearly far more focused on melee damage as a whole, and gives Amara the ability to attune her action skill to the cryo element, which is huge since frozen enemies take 300% extra melee damage. Enlightened Force also has some pretty decent weapon and skill damage skills to spec into, but they're closer to the end, which makes them pretty difficult to justify most of the time. Phase Flare, this tree's action skill, is also very powerful and can run with the best of them, leaving the Enlightened Force tree in a solid A tier spot. Next up at the chopping block is Flak, starting with their Stalker tree. The Stalker tree starts off pretty bland and uninspiring, with subpar skills like Sick'em and Overclocked, whose effects are so insignificant that they're almost not worth the points at all. However, about halfway down this tree, it starts getting super fun, with skills like the Hidden Machine, the Fast and the Furious, Turn Tail and Run, and the capstone, the Power Within. And those are just the offensive skills. This skill tree has a lot of great defensive skills as well, and gives Flak's pet the ability to revive them. The Stalker tree is also the skill tree that has Fade Away, which is one of Flak's best action skills, which definitely earns this tree an S tier ranking. Flak's master tree is primarily intended as Flak's pet tree, with all sorts of bonuses for their pet's damage, health, and passive bonuses, with its action skill being Gamma Burst, which infuses Flak's pet with radiation damage. The biggest problem with the master tree is that it's very single purpose, with next to no generally useful skills. Unless you're really trying to min-max your pet, the master tree just isn't worth the points. What's even worse though is a majority of the skill tree is made redundant by its second tier skill, Who Rescued Who, which grants Flak's pets lifesteal based on Flak's damage, which makes every other damage resistance, max health, and health regen skill in this tree completely worthless. Overall, this tree is okay, but not really worth the investment, which leaves the master tree in a B tier spot. Flak's orange tree, the hunter tree, is quite possibly Flak's single best skill tree, with some of their best skills, like Leave No Trace, a skill that can regenerate ammo on critical hits, Big Game, which buffs 8 other skills in Flak's trees, the Most Dangerous Game, which grants loads of extra damage when killing a badass, and its capstone, Megavore, which gives every single hit a 20% chance to be a critical hit. The Hunter tree is very powerful in almost any situation, which definitely earns it an S tier spot. Flak's base game skill trees are all very powerful, which makes it all the more disappointing that their DLC skill tree, the Trapper tree, is an absolute letdown. This skill tree is primarily dedicated to shield recharge and survivability, which is one thing that Flak of all the characters really didn't need. I mean seriously, Flak already has so many different ways to keep themselves alive in battle, and of all the Vault Hunters that needed a survivability tree, they were certainly at the bottom of that list. To top it all off, the Trapper tree's action skill is Gravity Snare, which is basically just a worse Phase Grasp, and that leaves the Trapper tree being the first skill tree so far to land in the D tier. Now on to Moze's skill trees, starting with her green tree, Bottomless Mags. This tree does exactly what you'd think it's supposed to just by hearing the name. It gives Moze bottomless magazines. This tree saves Moze ammo through its skill Cloud of Lead, which makes every 4th shot not consume ammo at 5 out of 5 points. And it also grants Moze some pretty powerful ammo regeneration based off of her current magazine size, which is great since this tree also has a lot of skills that increase Moze's magazine size, making this ammo regen even stronger. The only real downside to this tree is that the only decent source of damage it has is from Click Click, which increases damage based on how low your magazine size is. Which, if you're spec'd into the green tree, your magazine size should never be dropping low enough to actually get any extra damage from that skill. This one fact is what stops the Bottomless Mags tree from being an S tier skill tree, rather than the A tier it actually belongs in. Okay, I'm gonna get some flack for this next ranking, but here we go. The Demolition skill tree is honestly kind of boring. This tree is pretty much just 2 skills, Fire in the Skag Den and Short Fuse. Every other skill in this tree is essentially just filler to get from point A to point B. The biggest issue with the Demolition Woman tree is that it tries to not only be a splash damage tree, but also tries to be an Iron Bear tree as well, and it does neither of those things well. There is only one actual splash damage skill in this whole tree, and that's Torg Cross Promotion, which most people don't even use because it kills the player more often than not. This tree's failures are pretty obvious when you consider the fact that splash damage builds rely on spam shooting weapons to proc Short Fuse as much as possible, rather than using an actual splash damage weapon. This tree doesn't actually buff splash damage, it just makes every weapon a splash damage weapon. However, while I do not personally like this tree in the slightest, there's no denying how powerful the Short Fuse and Fire in the Skag Den combo really are, which at the very least earns it an A tier spot. However, if those 2 skills were removed from the tree, or if Fire in the Skag Den didn't get Mayhem scaling, this tree would land itself in a D tier spot for sure. Moze's orange tree, Shield of Retribution, is a skill tree all about getting Moze's shields as high as humanly possible as well as her gun damage. The biggest issue with this skill tree is a lot of its damage comes from stacking kill skills, which while that works for heavy mobbing areas, it kind of falls flat for any kind of bossing. This skill tree is very similar to Axton's trees from Borderlands 2. It relies very heavily on kill skills or stacking with little to no way to activate those kill skills aside from struggling to kill your first enemy. The most starting damage you can get from this skill tree is through U-Rat anointments and the thin red line skill to get the extra radiation damage. Other than that though, you're essentially relying on easy, early kills to get your stacks up, which leaves this tree in a really low C tier position. Moze's Bear Mother tree succeeds in half of what the demolition tree failed to do, buffing Iron Bear to its absolute limits. This tree takes Iron Bear from the unstoppable killing machine it is to a true god of destruction. Through skills like nitro-trinadium engines, Never Gonna Give You Up, and its capstone Running on Fumes, this tree gives Iron Bear near infinite fuel, and with really big guns and feature creep, Iron Bear's damage increases even more. Big Surplus is a tier 1 skill in this tree that can take Moze's damage to insane levels on later Mayhem modes thanks to its scaling. With all that said, Bear Mother definitely earns itself an S tier spot. Zane's undercover skill tree is a very underwhelming skill tree. Pretty much all of this tree's skills are very pointless and made very redundant by not only the other tree's skills, but even the green tree's very own action skill, Barrier. The green tree is all about crowd control and damage resistance, which is cool and all, but with 10 points in this tree, you can literally have 360-degree protection, making you damn near immune to any and all damage. Even this tree's capstone, Confident Competence, grants a measly 35% extra damage. And the only reason I even look at the green tree when I'm playing Zane is to get the all-rounder barrier augment for full barrier immunity. Just based on the skills, the green tree would be a D tier skill tree for sure, but considering it's the skill tree with the barrier, I'll bump it up to a C tier. As for Zane's blue tree, Hitman, it is phenomenal. There is not a single skill in this whole tree that isn't good. From the insane damage granted from violent momentum and the constant kill skill activation through Seeing Red, to the capstone that doubles kill skill duration and increases their effects by 25%. This skill tree is Zane, and pretty much every Zane build will spec into this tree at least until Seeing Red for the kill skill activation. This skill tree is without a doubt an S tier skill tree, even with its subpar action skill. The doubled agent tree starts off super strong, with Donnybrook, Synchronicity, and Borrow Time all being within the first 2 tiers of the tree. However, whereas Hitman was really good for general use, after the second tier of doubled agent, none of the skills are going to do anything for you unless you're running clone. However, if you are running clone, then this entire skill tree can get pretty crazy, with Boom, Enhance, Duct Tape Mod, and Double Barrel, which allows your clone to absolutely destroy every single raid boss in this game. This skill tree does have its fair share of bad skills though, like Trick of Light and Like a Ghost, but it certainly earns itself an A tier at the very least. Zane's purple tree, the Professional, is another really strong skill tree that gives Zane a bunch of really useful buffs, from being able to sprint and shoot at the same time, which Zane has needed forever, to granting bonuses like critical damage, weapon damage, and cooldown rate. Plus, the purple tree is also the skill tree that introduces the Mantis Cannon, which finally allows Zane to take advantage of action skill and anointments, as well as keep his kill skills constantly going without the use of the Seeing Dead class mod. The purple tree opened up a lot of different possible builds for Zane that don't rely on the Seeing Dead class mod, which up until the release of DLC 6 was once thought impossible. For that alone, the Professional skill tree has got itself an S tier spot. So there you have it, all of the skill trees in Borderlands 3 ranked. Do you agree with my picks in this video? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.